How are leading healthcare organizations using advanced analytics and AI to transform the patient experience? As healthcare costs continue to rise and patient satisfaction remains a challenge, many organizations are turning to data-driven insights to improve outcomes and efficiency. I'm Jonathan Kersting with the Pittsburgh Technology Council, and this episode of Healthcare Reinvented explores how Highmark Health is leveraging cutting-edge analytics to enhance decision-making across the enterprise. Highmark's Dr. Richard Clarke and Ian Blunt join me and my co-host, Tech Council CEO Audrey Russo, so you can discover how Highmark's analytics team is embedding data and AI into every aspect of the business to drive better results. Learn how Highmark is partnering with tech giants like Google to accelerate their analytics capabilities and unlock new possibilities. Finally, understand the cultural shift required to make data and AI a core part of an organization's DNA. So keep on listening to learn how Highmark is using analytics to create remarkable health experiences for their members. Let's get the conversation started.
Well, everyone, it's pretty cool that we're going to be back in the studio again, talking to some people that we needed to get an update on. There's lots of things to talk about. Lots of things. I'm excited about this.
And we always start with introductions, Audrey. So,
do we?
Yeah,
I'm Audrey Russo.
Oh, and I'm Jonathan Kersting, of course.
But we are here. Let's start with Richard. Hi, Richard. Nice to see you.
Hey, Audrey. Hey, Jonathan. Great to see you again. Both of you. Richard Clarke, Chief Analytics Officer here at Highmark Health, and super excited to have an opportunity to catch up with you on some of the fun work that we've been up to here, hopefully transforming healthcare with data and analytics.
Really exciting. And Ian, how are you?
Oh, great, guys. Thanks for asking. So my name's Ian Blunt. I'm VP of Advanced Analytics here at Highmark, the former centre of expertise for all things data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and other sophisticated analytic methods.
I feel like we had the dynamic duo of getting stuff done around all things analytics and healthcare. What I love about you guys have been doing this for a long time with Highmark, which I think is just so important. You put this foundation, and I know you're seeing results and everything like that, which is it gets us so excited at the Tech Council when we see what you guys are up to.
Well, you know what else is exciting? Talk about just a little bit about your career journey.
Right.
Because you didn't just wake up and say, oh, this is the job that I'm going to be landing in.
Good point. I like that a lot. Absolutely.
So, Ian, just talk a little bit about your journey professionally.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting one. So, yeah, I actually trained as a mechanical engineer doing computer models of essentially fluid flow around internal combustion engines, but then kind of decided I wasn't really getting what I wanted out of engineering. Struck out just to see what else I could do with my skills and landed in healthcare, and I found kind of everything I wasn't getting out of that engineering experience. A wonderful world that really does matter to people. So if you know how to read the data right, you can see individual people's journeys through health and social care systems, what's going on. And then if you layer those journeys on top of each other, you can start to understand how these systems work. And if you understand how the systems work, then you can improve them. And that, to me, is so exciting, endlessly fascinating, the things that we learn every day about how healthcare works and how we can make healthcare better. And then bringing to bear data science, machine learning techniques against that. Healthcare traditionally an area for lots of really good reasons and some less good reasons, relatively slow to adopt data science technologies, but being able to marry those up and see the opportunities across the organization to really do good for the members and patients, the people that we serve. That gets me super excited. And here at Highmark, as you said, we've been doing this a long while. We've built out a decent sized analytic group that's looking across the entire enterprise for how can we enhance every decision that gets made across the enterprise with this sort of advanced analytics insights that we're able to bring to bear and put those in the hands of the human experts to really make the best decision that they possibly can on behalf of Highmark, the members, and our patients.
So you've really seen the journey with leadership that doesn't use data, that might do strategy, but doesn't necessarily use data, to now the adoption of data being an integral part of decision making.
Yeah, and I think that's happened across industry, probably over the
Mhm.
last decade or more. Certainly, there used to be this relatively kind of macho sense of they're supposed to intuitively know
Right.
what direction the business should go in. And I think we've seen the rise of a slightly newer generation of leaders who understand the value you can get out of really solid data analysis, but then also what else needs to be brought into the table in terms of strategy and connection and how to really apply those insights. And I think critically, when we think about that kind of boundary between what we call the business side, the analytics side, how to ask the right questions. And that's true of both parts of the divide. So business leaders being able to ask better questions of the analysts, probably more challenging questions of the analysts. And then also the analysts knowing what extra information they need from the business leaders to make sure they're really zoning in on the right areas of insight that they need to be bringing to the table.
And really, Ian, I mean, you and I have been doing this for what, a decade together now, right?
I
Which
know,
has been
it's crazy.
fun. And, the tools and toys that we get to play with have certainly changed. But, I don't know if you agree, Ian, but like at its core, it's still change management. At the end of the day, we're trying to change human behavior. Again, we have more fun toys to play with, but that's still the thing that's right at the center of this whole thing, which, as we all know, is not easy.
One of the toughest jobs out there, without a doubt. And the fact that you guys have mentioned that 10 years together, I knew it was a long time. I wasn't thinking 10 years, Audrey. That's
Wow. So
saying
you're
something.
working together. So what about you, Richard, your journey, just a little bit?
Yeah. So quickly, come out of academia, PhD here locally at Pittsburgh, the Center for Neural Basis of Cognition, joint Pitt CMU program, was a postdoc at Pitt, similar to Ian, just wasn't kind of getting exactly, what I wanted out of that. And, saw a career change, spent a little time in management consulting, actually in financial services. I got to experience the kind of the big data craze inside of that. Had a former colleague that had moved to Highmark and said, hey, let's try to apply some of those techniques that were being applied in financial services and healthcare, to some of Ian's word, in a very kind of probably macho and arrogant way. I stomped in thinking we could easily do that, and then was quickly humbled by the fact that healthcare is very complicated. And I give it complete credit for that. Luckily found amazing collaborators like Ian, and then just a ton of support. I just give the Highmark Health, leadership, David and others, a ton of credit at seeing analytics as a kind of strategic part of the company that was really going to not just inform where we've been, but where we're going to go in terms of the active decision making, and really had a platform to start to work on that. And what's been crazy is the last couple of years, it kind of went from we were out evangelizing what we're doing, kind of increasing the number of folks that were engaging with the team, where now Ian and I talk about every single day that the demand for our services far exceeds the capacity that we have to meet that demand. So it's all about prioritization at this point, because it is such a demand, a data insight heavy culture, which has been really cool to see.
Mhm. Oh yeah, you're like the internal demand group, I would imagine, right? That people are constantly coming to you, and you're figuring out where the priorities are and how it aligns to the mission of the organization.
Yeah, and in some ways, I mean, I talk to Mike Bennett, our chief strategy officer, about it all the time too. Is we're a component of really the strategy team as well now, just because AI and advanced analytics is becoming such a part of where we need to go. So it's been a real exciting ride just to see the kind of the breadth and importance of the work continue to grow.
And so when you think about the primary goals of the data analytics, are there any key objectives in there that maybe that you could talk to us at like a high level so people can understand some of the examples or anything that could shed some light?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start and then Ian, please build on this. Obviously, Highmark's mission, right, is to create remarkable health experiences, freeing
Right.
people to be their best. And I think our work is to really liberate the kind of expertise that kind of either sits within the data or within a small number of people's heads to allow that to happen, right? And David Holmberg has been saying for a while that we're data rich and insight poor, and I keep telling him, hey, I think we're trying to get a little wealthier every day, from an insight perspective. And I think we're really doing that. I think Ian said it really well, right? We're trying to show up, not 30 days after, not 30 minutes after. We're trying to show up at the moment that someone needs, additional expertise and insight with some analytic insight derived based on our wealth of data to help more optimal choice get made. And you could apply that in like any number of circumstances. That could be, in terms of on the health plan side, right? In terms of navigation through the very complex health system, or how benefits are applied on the provider side in terms of kind of what the next best clinical action is, really across the board. And that's kind of our aspiration, which means we got to get like deeply embedded inside of those systems, and it creates all sorts of, challenges, but that's kind of where we want to be. I don't know, Ian, anything else you would add to that?
You get like applied. So to Ian, then you have to get inside all the systems, right?
Oh yeah.
So when people think about systems, it's like patient flow, individual care, as well as things that sit across.
Yeah, and that's a big part of our success, especially in those earlier years. Just subject matter knowledge of how these systems fit together, and then from a more technical point, how to kind of connect them so we can get the information out. And one thing you'll see just across the healthcare industry is data tend to be incredibly siloed, not terribly well documented. And so being able to combine a group of very talented, inquisitive people who have both the technical skills to go access the data and analyze them correctly, but also the business knowledge to know where to look for these data sets and what they actually represent in the real world. That's kind of a sweet spot. And to the point Richard made earlier, that's not really changed. That's just one of the fundamentals of really doing good analytics, I guess, in any industry. And yeah, we've got a much cooler tool set to do it with, and that opens up a ton of new possibilities in and of itself. But at the fundamental core, it's like, do you know what you're trying to achieve? And do you have the data to help you achieve that? Those are the two basic questions, and then you're kind of off to the races with whatever you want to do.
I mean, I would imagine sometimes that you don't even, at the beginning, I don't know about now, that you didn't even know what data you really had.
Oh right? Yeah, I mean, because it's just so complex, healthcare as a business. So the black box recorder on a commercial airliner tracks 300 KPIs. So think about that plane that you might need to know. You can describe in 300 measures. We deal with, well, first of all, essentially the human body to an extent and how it's measured. Then a whole bunch of different departments within a provider system, then how provider systems interact. And then we've got the payer side piece as well. And the payer, having many different functions in terms of, health insurance, but also, some of the kind of marketing-based work that it does, customer interaction work that it does. So yeah, so many really interesting little pockets of data for many partners we work with to deliver digital health solutions as well, getting feeds in from those. Yeah, it's endlessly fascinating, I think. And another key kind of part of our approach is being able to produce useful minimum viable products, or MVPs. So let's pull together the data we've got now, integrate it, get the insight and push it out. And we find it's far more useful to do that, even if it's slightly clunky, even if it's not complete, as long as it's making reliable decisions, because that builds that muscle of people using that insight in some way. And then as time goes on, you can do much slicker technical integration. So you take the clunk out, you add more data, so you get even more accurate decisions. But I think especially an industry like healthcare having some of the data access challenges it does, it's far better to start with what you've got and get something good than it is to wait for things to be perfect and then try and build some amazing system, because you're going to be waiting a very, very long time to do that.
One thing that I think has been very interesting, and this cuts across, I think, Highmark in so many ways, is that you guys always go out and find partners as well, too, which has been, I think, a secret to your success. I know you guys made big headlines, not just here in Pittsburgh, but I really think across the nation and the world when you guys partnered up with Google, which I thought was so cool. Can you fill us in on how that has progressed so far? I'm assuming it has been a pretty awesome project to be involved with.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, of course, myself and Ian perfectly knew that generative AI was going to happen. So we partnered with a large, no, I'm kidding. I mean, that was a nice byproduct, but absolutely in late 2020, we kind of knew, we knew where we were headed, which was we needed more real-time analytics informing an increasingly digital future with kind of increasingly varied and higher volume data sets. That was kind of as much as we do. When we said, well, in order to deal with that, we need a kind of cloud partner that can enable us massive scalability, can kind of bring us new advances. And Google has been tremendous. Now, of course, we've kind of pivoted back and forth with them as they get to know us better, as we get to know them better, et cetera. But it's been a tremendous, partnership. Our data platform, was stood up. So we have a tremendous amounts of our data, on the cloud. We've migrated a lot of our kind of core analytic workloads to that have allowed us to greatly increase not only the speed with which we're working, but the volume of data that we're dealing with. And then, of course, you have the explosion of the, emergence of generative AI, which, in and of itself is interesting. But when it gets really interesting is when you can pair that generative AI with your own proprietary data. And, our secure Google Cloud Platform allows us to do that, exactly that, with meeting all of the security parameters, with meeting kind of zero data leakage. We're not letting our data get out into the world, but then allow us to apply these foundational models that, of course, we could never train ourselves, but we can leverage them grounded and trained in our own data. It's been, truly, transformational to us and really opened up a whole new set of data that we'd even consider, because now it's not just all the data that are kind of in some database structure, but it's all the written, documents across our entire enterprise, which is like a lot.
So are you finding because of the proliferation into all of our hands, AI and, chat and generative and all the other tools, are you finding that now that you can go deeper and wider across the company and get people more interested in the data that you're able to curate and leverage? And do they then use these other tools of AI to then further cull that data? Are you feeling like that's part of the fabric of the company? Like,
I think this has been a huge shift. And Ian, you probably have felt it even more, right? Because as Ian, even in his intro, he said, right, he and his team have been an amazing center of expertise on this, and largely pre-generative AI. This was, not that it isn't today, but it's still very complex stuff, right? So if you wanted we were training and deploying lots of ML-based models, but largely, you'd work with Ian's team that had the expertise on how to do that, et cetera, et cetera. Today, it's as much about us enabling a vast number of employees to not only use AI, but, in some forms, build their own AI, right?
Yeah.
Either allowing it to access local corpuses of data that they have or things. And so it's been a shift, and it's been really interesting because it's a much about enablement. And then, frankly, in some ways, you ask me, well, what are the use cases? I'm like, well, I don't even know, because I'm sure in the 15 minutes we've talked here, someone figured out a new case on how to use these amazing tools to create more value. And that's awesome, and that's awesome.
I can see why you're engaged on this because of how fast it's moving and the results that you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a force multiplier to us because, if we're giving the tools to the whole business, they can do way more than our group can ever do. The kind of real challenge here, which used to be implicit before the latest generation of large language models, is that, there's some pitfalls with using any form of artificial intelligence. You've got to be aware, how to interpret the predictions, how to use it effectively. And, in the olden days, what we call traditional AI, if you're going to build a predictive model, you need to be able to code. That implied some degree of expertise, familiarity with it. And it was, there was some kind of inherent safeguards. Now, of course, large language models are much easier for anyone to interact with because they're based around just natural language. So we need to push kind of, that sense of, the correct safeguards and responsible use of AI much wider into the organization. And as we talk about empowering everyone throughout Highmark with these tools, we're doing so in a way that really, does its best to keep them safe as well. So, the amount of kind of guidance and guardrails we build in appropriate to the level of skill and knowledge of the people trying to use it. And in that way, it's incredibly powerful, but also just tries to guard against any possible accidental misuse.
Sure. I would imagine people come in with, now it's like back in the day of bring your device to work, right? It's bring your AI to work, right? And there's expectations. Do you see that?
Yeah, definitely. Go on, Richard.
I would just very quickly, and you're probably closer than I, but I mean, I meet with just as a small sample, right? Every year we have 15-ish interns across the department, somewhere in that number. And I always meet with all of them as they go through, and two of one, they all were so excited about having access to generative AI tools here, because think about it, you're a intern in a highly complex environment. Oftentimes you're stepping into an ongoing project, because we try really hard. We always say, if you're going to come intern with us, you're going to work on real stuff that we're really working on. We're not going to do some made up project, right? But so you're stepping into something, you don't understand the data structures. Oftentimes it would be half of their internship figuring out what the heck was going on. Now it's like half a day, because they'll get some code, they'll put it into tools, they'll say explain in layman terms to this. They might, if they only know how to code in Python, but something else is in R, that's fine. They'll just convert seamlessly back and forth. It is just the ramp to productivity it's incredible how much that has changed. So I don't know, Ian, is that kind of synonymous with what you've seen?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a real balance of expectations of what you can do as a private individual versus what you can do within a necessarily secure environment. And I think the bring your device to work analogy is a really important one. We're literally just having this debate with the executive team this morning about what are we going to do as people start to create more and more of their personal agents, and they want to see that ability replicated in their workspace as well. But obviously we need to do it in a responsible way, and hopefully that can give everyone access to any kind of agent that someone at Highmark might start to develop. There's a really good example, as soon as the latest generation of large language models broke, the most common request in my inbox was, can I just have ChatGPT, please? And the answer is, of course, no, because that's public ChatGPT. We don't want anyone accidentally, however well-intentioned, putting PHI in that public server. So we responded by giving them a version of that based on the Google tools that they can use within Highmark secure environments, safe for PHI. And we're going to see more and more of that. Even, I think, some of the likely innovations that are coming forward with interfaces with augmented reality, with people with glasses. Well, that could be your personal device. And now you're recording on your personal device activities that are happening within the workplace. How are we thinking about that from a privacy point of view? So we're part of that equation. We play a little bit of...
That's the same thing you went through with bring your device to work.
Exactly.
And then people would have what they would call burner phones, right? And they would say, this is your burner phone. And then we were I mean, that's how I came up in tech. So this analogy for me is exactly the same.
And
I think companies,
it's like that.
Yeah, and it's at companies' peril to pretend that that's not going to exist, right? I think we need to lean into it and say, okay, how can we safely and securely enable this? Because it's not only what's going to be demanded, but it's what's best for the environment, right? And challenging as that's going to be.
Look how far we've come with VPNs and phones and smartphones and integration and all that. Who would have thought you could have your finance data on your home phone, right?
Right.
And keep it siloed and keep it secured. So I think we're at the same point, because I'm seeing people, everyone's got a toy, right? Everyone's got a toy in AI. Well, I'm using this and I'm using that and I'm playing with this and I did this and I did that. They're coming to the world with playing with these toys, and they don't understand, what it means to be private, what it means to be, secure, etc. So I would think you're playing in the sandbox. You're having fun playing in the sandbox.
Yeah.
So you're leading strategy as well as identifying data, trends.
So tell us about any success stories that you've seen, some things you've seen that you see particularly proud of. We're wow, we're actually seeing a difference being made. You're seeing cost savings. You're seeing patients being served better or faster. I'm just so curious as to what you guys have been able to spin out that's really worked well.
Ian, do you want to go first? Or I mean, we have a long list, but you can go ahead. I'll follow up.
Yeah, so we've got so many applications, and we try kind of the spirit of what we were talking about earlier, trying to enhance every different part of the business. So we've got examples where we scan the needs of the payer population so we can understand where there's some challenging outcomes in little groups. So whether that's a health outcome or some kind of cost utilization outcome and experience outcome. And then we work with product and health experience group to start to design a solution around that. Maybe we need to repurpose something Highmark's already able to do. Maybe we need to work with another partner that's specialized in that area so we can bring in additional solutions that can further support the members. So a wonderful example there is the virtual physical therapy partner that we work with that's had truly incredible outcomes, both in terms of managing cost, improving people's mobility, and having a wonderful experience as well. And the really cool part of being in my role is I can see that from identifying the opportunity, then working to help direct members towards that particular solution. And then also we do evaluations of it as well. So we can understand what's working, what needs to be improved, and what we should scale because it's very successful. So when that one came out of the evaluation group saying, everyone had a good feeling about it because we were getting wonderful early feedback from members, but being able to see that it really was making a significant difference, fantastic stuff. We also work in trying to make Highmark's operational processes more efficient as well. So one part of the US healthcare experience that everyone kind of bemoans is the prior authorization stage. It's kind of necessary, but always, not always straightforward. So one of our relatively early applications actually was to look at the authorization request processing and see if we could speed that up. And by using different applications of machine learning technologies, we're able to reduce the time that it takes to process one of those cases by more than a third. So people are getting much quicker authorization processing. Also, it took away a lot of the more kind of menial task, a lot of clicking and copying and pasting away from authorization nurses. So they were focusing more on using their skills and expertise to make a really good judgment within that authorization case. Those are just two examples.
Let me give you one other. Yeah, let me just give you one other quick one because this is more of a example of a process. So one thing we see a lot, which we're really excited about, is we'll have specific ideas, and this is particularly the case with some of our generative AI use cases. We'll have a particular idea, which turns out to be kind of really a horizontal that many can offer. And so it starts out as a specific idea, but ends up as a broad feature. So as an example, our entry into Southeastern PA around Philadelphia, there were a lot of additional language services that we had to offer. Traditionally that would be, hey, let's go out to a vendor, get those. Generative AI is amazing at translation, right? And so we're able to very rapidly deploy translation within that, allowing us to provide benefit booklets and other communications, for faster, cheaper, just better for our members. That immediately became lots of areas like, oh, that's amazing. So we deployed it as a translation services, and not only there, but inside of our internal applications. I hear all the time. I mean, I just had a doc from AHN grab me. He's like, oh, I see a lot of, Haitian community, Ross Draver, PA or something. He's like, I needed better translation services for after visit summaries. And so we're using this. And so it's just amazing that you'll have these things that are a point example. They'll in themselves have value, but it turns out to then be a broad horizontal that we can push out. And then has, like Ian said before, kind of a force multiplier. And there's just so many of those examples. And we're really starting to deploy those inside of our applications as kind of prompt libraries that will show up as suggestions. Because as we all know in generative AI, prompting is so important. So it'd be like, oh, it looks like you're trying to compare two contracts. Okay, well, here's a kind of pre-curated way to do that because it just helps people get to the right answer faster.
So are you seeing this adoption and this sort of overall data strategy and values, right? That is now coming right from the top and embedded into decision making. Are you seeing that across every business unit and every function in across the organization? Like, are you seeing that in nurses? Are you seeing that in doctors? Are you seeing that in PAs? Are you seeing that obviously in providers? Are you seeing that obviously in algorithms and predictive modeling. But are you seeing some pockets of big embrace?
Yeah, I mean, we really are. And it's been, to be frank, I mean, not to make it sound all rosy, but we really are. And it's been quite universal. I mean, we're having regular, executive leadership team sessions with different areas, and they're coming through talking about their integrated strategy of how to bring
Right.
AI into their area, and it's back office, right? Procurement or HR.
Right.
It's kind of front of house with the, with the providers. It's our contact centers, and, to a T. Frankly, the list of ways they want to apply it is kind of longer than kind of how fast we could churn out the solution. So it's definitely a time of transformation. I think what is the turn that we're going to see here is twofold, right? Is it's going to continue to go from like just individual applications to then redesigning processes, because people are going to say, oh, wow, we have all these individual, now it doesn't make sense.
The work thing.
Yeah, that's right. And so it really becomes a workflow redesign question. And then, of course, it's going to be the big explosion of how that translates into actual agents that are doing work on behalf of the areas. And that's really where we're going to be headed in 25.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you believe that? In 25, you'll be headed into that. Right?
It's crazy.
Right?
Yeah. And so what about before we sort of land this plane of a great conversation, what are some toys and tools that you two use? Are there things that are like go-to that you play with and it can be anything, like, even at home or outside of this, or what are some of your go-to tools? Because people talk about that now. There's so many things that are out there. We just did an event with all teachers, and it was amazing, what teachers use and what they don't use. But when the experts were all like rattling off all the different things that they use, their application propensities were really interesting. Are there some tools and things that you can? It doesn't mean this is an endorsement. It's just.
Oh no, listen, my current obsession is I am just really obsessed with how we're applying this in the provisioning and delivery of care. Right. And so I'm spending a bunch of time with our clinicians, just understanding, how our tools, obviously, primarily Google provided. So kind of MedLM, their large language model that is specifically trained on the medical corpus, can be deployed there. How things are cropping up, like open evidence, which is another, tool that, is really kind of increasing, I think, use in the clinical areas, but really how we can harness some of that, how we can apply that, and then how we can really start to test whether or not diagnostic quality or ease, quantitatively, how we could test whether or not that's getting better. So that's what I'm talking to a lot of the docs about. So I'm just so interested in that particular space, because I do think, 2024 and a bunch of 2025 will continue to be how we're getting more efficient, but it's definitely going to go further than that. And so I'm excited to see how that applies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say most of the tools I play with, the ones I have at work, because that's the relevant data set. So predominantly Google, but some others as well. And in private life, I've become, kind of the how does that work guy, because I'm now, whenever someone says, hey, this greatest AI tool, I'm like, okay, let's try and take it apart. What's under the hood? Which foundational LLM are they running? How have they configured it? And all of that kind of good stuff. So I'm probably not much fun if you show me your AI tool, because I'll be straight into the detail. But I mean, this wonderful explosion that we're seeing of how to use it is just like so fantastic, and people getting so used to kind of building that capability. I think it's way faster than anything we've seen. I think the adoption of the smartphone probably is your best analogy, like how quickly a smartphone just became part of our daily lives, to the point that I'd say 5 years after the first iPhone came out, it was regarded as pretty much an essential thing for everyone to have, so they could interact in public life. And then, how the current state of AI is playing out in that, and then also where it's going as well, thinking about how we use agents and some of the things that the large tech companies think about in terms of creating personal agents that do things on your bid, and how those agents are going to start to interact with various company agents. It's going to be a fascinating couple of years watching that evolve.
I'm excited to see how much it changes, and then when we talk to you in like 6 months from now,
and how much stays the same.
How much stays the same?
It's so interesting. People ask us very often. So what are the skill sets that we need to teach people? What are the skill sets, right? This whole kind of thing. Like, who would have thought when you were in high school or college that this is the kind of work that you'd be doing? Sure, you mentioned, Ian, that, you didn't find satisfaction in, working with engines or, sort of the hardcore engineering. You wanted to do something that had perhaps in your mind some more meaningful impact. But the thing that I always say to people, and with your wisdom, it would be great to hear your perspective. I say it's those skills that people used to label as soft skills are really the hard skills. And they're the ones and the people that do really well with that. And that includes, like Jonathan has a journalist degree, journalism, journalistic inquiry, right? How do you validate? Like the art of validation, like you just talked about, Ian, getting under the hood. The fact of being able to take information across a group of people and teach them how to not just question it, but figure out ways to apply that transform something. So those are not, I don't think we're doing a great enough job focusing on some of those skills, because you can teach people pretty quickly about the toys of AI, right? And it's the biggest thing is, how do you teach people the criticality and how to discern and how to take that information? So I always say, if you can be competent in finance, and if you can be competent in journalistic inquiry and the art of validation, and then have a great propensity towards data, right? Like using statistics and information like that you probably will do pretty well over this next 10 years, this next 15 years. But I just do that because I talk to people, hundreds of people a week, and just take that anecdotal information and then compile it into something. But it sounds like you're both validating that. You're both validating that it's the criticalness of, you can learn all those other things. And here you both are working in an area that needs a lot of transformation, right? It needs a lot of eyes on it, and it's very complicated, and it's very easy for people like Jonathan and I and others to sit in an armchair and think, well, we can fix that. We can fix that. That's easy, right? So my hat's off to both of you in terms of working, in an organization that has deep tentacles into our region, our people, right? And the community at large, trying to solve problems that haven't been solved, right? That many of the things that you're tackling are things that have never been solved. So toast to 2025.
Yeah, you guys keep the pioneer going.
Yeah, toast to 2025, because I want to hear these use cases in a few months.
That's why we keep having these conversations, Audrey.
It's really cool.
Yeah,
it's really cool. No BS. It's really cool.
Yeah, we're at this intersection of technology and healthcare, and watching what Highmark does, and the resources it throws to, the innovation it throws to it, and the talent that it brings in behind it to us is so exciting. And this has just been a fabulous update as to what you guys are up to, and it blows my mind. 10 years. How awesome is that you've been working on this for 10 years, and you keep turning up, obviously, new stuff because the tools get better, the technology gets crazier and crazier. You guys are the best.
Thank you.
We appreciate it, and we appreciate the opportunity to chat. So thank you.
No, thank you so much.
Too much fun, Audrey.
Way too much fun.